I want to start off by grounding us here really quickly in a poem, and I know we have some fantastic brains and minds and organizers here. I want to start off by just grounding us in a poem that actually I took from a dog poet called Linton Kwesi Johnson out of Brixton, England. It's called What About the Working Class? And so I twisted it. I won't do the whole thing, but I'll do a couple of verses. And so it's called Questions for Linton. From England to Poland, every step across the ocean, the ruling class and them is in a mess. Oh yes, crisis is the order of the day. There's so much people crying out for change nowadays. The youths want a lot more say. Insurrection is the order of the day. So what about the working class, Comrade Chairman? What about the working class? Them pay a tax, them carry a course, but we're not going to get no tanks in Gdansk. No, we're not going to get no tanks in Taipei. No, we're not going to get no tanks. 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 Are we annoying the trees with the sounds of human misery? What do the birds see as the sun hides their eyes? Where will the children play? Where will the children play, I say? From the east to the west, to the land I love the best, the ruling class and them is in a mess. Oh yes, crisis is the order of the day. There's so much people crying out for change nowadays. The youths want a lot more say. Insurrection is the order of the day. So don't blame it upon the black working class, Mr. Racist. Blame it upon the ruling class. We suffer the loss. We pay the tax. But we're not going to get no tanks in Mexico. No, we're not going to get no tanks in Taipei. No, we're not going to get no tanks in Port of Spain. No, we're not going to get no tanks. Tanks. And I saw a steel caterpillar cross my view, for the still wind knows the stench of human existence. So don't blame it upon the black working class, Mr. Racist. Blame it upon the ruling class. Because we suffer the loss. We pay the cost. But we're not going to get no tanks. 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 So thank you. There are more verses to that. I wanted to just open up to say that I am the co-chair of the Exploratory Committee 1199 on cooperatives, and we've been trying this for the last 10 years, and I believe the building of this movement is now aligning labor and the solidarity economy, and we have been on a journey, and we intend to make it happen. We intend to bring this to the United States of America and to our new movement, and what I call bringing back labor and bringing back the solidarity economy, they call it, and the cooperative. And so I wanted to quickly introduce one of my comrades, Bruce Richards, advisor, really quickly, just to give us a framing, a couple of minutes of the framing of what we're doing, and then we'll turn it over to Matt Meyer to give a conversation with why we are here, the Jackson Rising Redux book, and I hope that we all can share and buy it. So why don't I just get right into it, Bruce? Why don't you give us a little bit about your background, how it is that you got to this work, and what you see in terms of where you came, and how we get there.
Okay, I should probably start with New York. I've been here since 1980. My sense, and it's difficult just starting with where I come from without acknowledging the awful situation we're in today. We are getting our behinds whipped. We're taking a severe slacking from what I can see. And I also feel as though we are badly siloed. Our relationships are fairly fragile. We do a lot of networking. It's not good enough. We have to be having a shared vision. We need to be strategizing. We need a plan. that we're all working on. I look out at a lot of workers and community folk that I work with. I work in community and have done a lot of work organizing union organization. And it's clear to me, well, let me just say this. So at Beth Israel, this is where I really got my wake-up call, because, you know, consider myself a radical, and got an agreement from an employer that they would let workers meet among themselves for 30 minutes a month. And this is, I think, about 4,000 workers. And that they would let the leaders, the delegates, about 150 of them, meet every week for 2 hours. And that we could have a chapter meeting of all the workforce once a month. And that we would embark on a labor management relationship with labor and management, and that the workers could have these meetings to reach consensus and better understand where we want to go as an institution, that there would be some voice. What we learned was that at the monthly meetings, we had about 10% of the workers came out to the meetings. And it took a year to get that up to 50%. And it took a long time to get people to want to be in the presence of each other, right? People did not see the necessity of being in dialogue with each other about improving the work, okay? Why did they? They just had the leaders of the union would come in and during the contract time and get them some better wages and benefits and so on and so forth. What was this point about meeting among themselves to try to reach a consensus about what works and what doesn't work? What is that about, you know? And it was very, that shocked me. It took a bunch of years of really prioritizing the necessity of workers being in dialogue with each other to move the dial on this, right? And I realized that in the community, it's the same situation. Residents and neighbors, they ain't looking to sit down and meet with each other. They don't see each other as their first line of defense when it comes to solving problems. They don't see that. So when we're talking about solidarity economy, or some workers getting organized, or a community getting organized, we're gonna bump up against the fact that a lot of people are just saying, hey, leave me alone, I'm looking out for number one, I don't wanna be bothered, keep that shit away from me, I'm minding my own business, right? And so it's my sense that we really have to prioritize this relationship building issue in all the work we do. We have to put some resources behind it. We have to really make it an issue. It can't be some sideline matter, because it is the result of what has transpired for decades. It is the manifestation of the ass whipping that we've gotten, right? So, I don't have all the answers to this, but I do know that we have to, the people that are dying from preventable and premature death that goes on in our communities, particularly the poor, black and brown communities, is off the hook. And so it's apparent to me that some different things need to be happening among us, all of us in this room, some very different things. We have to stop doing a lot of the things we're doing, and there's a lot of new things we have to be doing. We have to be reaching some agreements among ourselves that we haven't made yet. We have to be finding some common ground, and we need all of the sectors that are out here today that are doing the climate, the education, the food, the housing, you name it, formerly incarcerated. We need to all be under the same tent with a plan, right? And we need to find the way to get out of each other's way, all the bad mouthing and backbiting and all of the things that we do that prevent us from doing that. And what is the role of the union? Huh? Yeah. So a lot of you probably think the union's role has been to handle grievances and get these contracts and have these kind of things done. But a union is actually a stakeholder within the social justice movement, and we need to better understand our role. You need to help shape and define that role. We have to find this shared vision. So I am hopeful that we're going to be able to see this fragile relationship and strengthening it as a part of the dialogue this evening. In terms of us going somewhere, we need to be generating some excitement by residents. We need to be having some ideas and thoughts about what will it take for community residents to want to sit in the same room with each other and be in dialogue and be strategizing. What will it take for workers to want to do that, right? What happens when we, I'm also looking at getting some cooperatives done, tapping into supply chains and getting some agreements from where our tax dollars go in health systems to get some job creation that is worker owned, that is unionized worker owned, right? And what are these workers going to be thinking about when they come together, right? Huh? What have we been learning as working people and as community residents, right? Do you depend and count on your neighbors and your residents as your first line of defense when you have a problem in your community? Is that your orientation? Huh? So I think we are at a very critical moment. The right wing is crawling all over us, right? And if we don't do something very serious, very different from what we have been doing, I think we're going to be in a lot more trouble, and I hope you have been giving a lot of thought to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And we are going to try to make as much thought as we can to build up a movement here. In my area, for instance, we've had, I work in the nursing home division, 1199. I'm responsible for some 22 different employers, some 6,000 members. And we went from 22 not-for-profit, mission-driven nursing homes. Within 10 years, we're now down to 3. Everything's been privatized. And so we now have to think about, as a union, how do we either have an answer or a response, or how do we go back into our communities and talk about why is it that we have capital extraction when we could be sort of sharing the profits within our community and anchoring healthcare as well in our communities. So I'm going to pass it over to Matt now. And Matt Meyer, many of you already know, so I don't need to introduce him. Go ahead, Matt.
All right, thank you, brother. Yes, dear.
Thank you.
This story is about organizing. This story is about organizing. And whether we're talking about a book, or an event, or a union, organizing is what we're here about tonight. Obviously, this is a book launch. I won't tell you how the story ends. You can buy copies of the book, read through it yourself, and then you'll know. But of course, we know that's not the ending. Like organizing, like events, like union work, like all organizing, we have to work together to make the end far, far better than it looks like it's going to be right now. So I'm going to say a few words about the book, but before that, I just want to say, this book's been out for a few months. and Kali and I worked in different cities and different states and different networks. And it took a minute to figure out the best place to have this New York City event. It actually took going to a conference in Arizona on workers' power, of all places. But there we met with Shaywaal, we met with Maria, we met with Ali Issa, who's not here tonight. Ali and Maria, both of the Cooperative Economic Alliance of New York. And we knew that this was the spot. Not because 1199 is perfect or has a perfect history, although we are aware that Shaywaal and Bruce represent a radical current within one of New York's most progressive unions. So we feel really at home here. But because we knew we could have a space tonight with you, that was a space to discuss strategy and tactic and organizing. So, and you know, it is an amazing thing. You know, Kali doesn't come to New York that often, and sometimes it even feels that when you come to New York, the earth moves. I mean, it's extraordinary. But the fact is that organizing in the context of a book is always a strange tool. Books are strange tools to do organizing. And in some ways, we looked at this book, and we look at this book as an organizing tool, understanding the complications within it. Because in fact, in a book, within the cover, you can have, amicably, many different strategies, many different tactics. You can even have quite different and distinctive ideologies, from eco-socialism to some anarchism. It's a diverse space that appears to be comfortably housed within the coalition of 300 pages. Not always so when we bring those people into a room together. But I think of the late Baba Sekou Odinga, who some of us in this room worked very closely with. Sekou, an early Black Panther from New York, member of Panther 21, 30 plus years as a political prisoner, and at the end of his life, part of the Spirit of Mandela Coalition, and building for a People's Senate, this body that's looking to be more representative of the people, and that is looking to say, okay, we're not going to have within our framework elections for anyone who commits or proposes genocide against anyone else. And Baba Sekou used to say, we have found many reasons, an extraordinary number of reasons, to not work together. And we need to change that around and do the opposite. We need to find the reasons to come together. We need to find, not that we ignore the differences, ideological, strategic, tactical, or otherwise, but we need to look deeper at the reasons and the points to work together. So, to the book, Corporation Jackson Redux is about, or Jackson Rising Redux is about Corporation Jackson, but not just. And part of the reason why this book came out, even though there was another edition, Cooperative, Jackson Rising, is that in some ways this book is a 2.0. It looks to go deeper. So it focuses on, of course, and you'll hear in detail from our dear brother Kali Akuno, the work to build Corporation Jackson, to continue it, to sustain it, and to make it an even more vibrant thing than it's been over the years. But it also talks about not just Jackson, but all over Mississippi. It talks about Georgia, Louisiana, the South, what some might call New Africa. And we can get back to that complicated phrase in a moment for those who don't know. But it also talks about Washington and Vermont. It talks about New York City in some ways, and we're going to talk more about New York City tonight, and even Puerto Rico. Part of the way I came into this project, and it's a great honor to be co-editor with Kali of this book. I'm definitely the junior co-editor in this sense, is because of decades of work I did with the Puerto Rican liberation movement. And it happened that my mentor, one of my key mentors, Dr. Luis Neves Falcón, passed away just around the time that Chokwe Lumumba passed away. Chokwe, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, that colleague was one of the principal architects in that extraordinarily successful electoral campaign. And so my chapter, Freeing the Land and Rebuilding the Movement, is all about what this concept of land and even what the phrase free the land means. If you're not familiar with it, you may want to check out a people's history that's not written by Howard Zinn. You may want to check out A People's History by J. Sakai Settlers, The Myth of the White Proletariat, from the Mayflower to modern times, and the idea that a nation, a new African nation exists in the South. One doesn't, it's not a requirement by a long shot to believe in that framework or that philosophy, though some of that helped develop a lot of what Cooperation Jackson became and was a large part of what Chokwe Lumumba lived and worked for. But I think it's important to understand the history and to understand the connectivity that freeing, say, the colony of Puerto Rico and freeing other colonialized spaces within the US, including so-called internal colonies, is part of a way we need to look at organizing in the 21st century. So land, power, and justice, and reframing what those words mean and what organizing around those things could be, is part of what this book tries to do beyond simply telling the story of Jackson. So some of that history is understanding that the United States is more, perhaps much more, than a nation state, much more like an empire than any traditional nation state, and that in some ways this prison house of nations is not just even about colonizing peoples or colonizing smaller nation states, but also colonizing the earth itself and the environment around us. So we are excited and honored that we have not only 1199 and union militants and People's Senate and Spirit of Mandela people, but also Extinction Rebellion in the House, struggling against the climate crisis. And I think it's important, as Extinction Rebellion says, that we are rebels, and not just rebels against things. We are rebels for life, for our lives, and for life itself. And so as we resist war and war taxes, as we resist the climate crisis, as we resist white supremacy, patriarchy, and heteropatriarchy, part of our job here is to redefine for this moment, for 2024 and beyond, what solidarity looks like. I'll say a word or two about redefining solidarity, and then I think my time will be up so we can get to hear from other folk. But solidarity, like all effective organizing, means more than just one thing. And we have to understand that there's more than one model and more than one way of doing solidarity. It could be, and has been, one big multiracial union of unity and struggle. It can also be small groups, including small groups of white people working together against white supremacy, working under the leadership of Black and Puerto Rican movements. It could be local collectives like Cooperation Jackson, which again you'll hear more about in a minute, paving new paths between electoral politics, land ownership, and building local economic power. It could be about, as we tried to do and is discussed in this book, envisioning a massive people's strike, especially if COVID is overtaking us. And we have some people in this room who are at the center of that effort, which, by the way, was a little bit unsuccessful. We did not have a massive people's strike, but we learned from our differences. We learned from our mistakes. We learned from things that didn't go exactly as we hoped, and we do better. And in fact, we learned that part of the dialectic of this work is taking care of family, and we're very sad that Saki Hall can't be with us tonight. She really, as I say every time, should be listed as a co-editor with Colleen and I, but she also has two of the most significant and poignant chapters, and it's super exciting to me that we have a special guest Sophie Gonick, who has a chapter in this book, but will not be reading from that chapter. You have to buy the book to read Sophie's chapter. She's going to read a section from Saki's, because Saki couldn't be here. She had to stay home and take care of some family business. So we are looking at redefining solidarity. We are looking at envisioning all kinds of new creative strategies and tactics for the future. And we know that this means working together. We know that this means conversations, dialogues, yes, book launches like this one, where part of your job is to buy books in large quantities. Yes. Oh, and I'm sorry, yes, so okay, Seiko Dinger and I did it. Anyway, there are lots of books. One of the things at Cooperation Jackson is a room, the Balagoon room, and we have a collection of writings. When I was talking about U.S. as an empire and not a nation state, it's like the idea that historically the U.S. has always meant white lives matter most. There, I've actually held up every single. Anyway, many more books on the table. Your job, in part, is to buy books, but our job is also to not talk so much, which is my cue for stopping talking, so that we can have a conversation both in the Q&A and after it's over, so we can work together and figure out how those of us who are in New York or the greater New York area, earthquake or not, will work together in more intense ways to build that unity, to build those new movements, to be creative, to build effectively for change, for human rights, for peace with justice. Thank you.
It's my turn? Or do we want to do the reading?
Oh.
Do we want to give the Sophie moment? Is this the Sophie moment?
I think let's maybe the Sophie.
Yes, this is the Sophie moment. Good friend and comrade, Sophie.
Come on up. Where we
Hi. Thank you all. Okay, thank you all. This is rather spur of the moment. It's wonderful to be here with my friend Kelly Akuno and my new friend Mayer. I'm an academic, and a lot of what I do feels like just kind of engaging in small conversations that reach about 10 people, and so to have to be able to engage in conversations with fellow activists and write for activist communities and engaged publics and to think about the work that I do is really a privilege, and so being included in this book is an incredible honor, and yes, please buy the book so that you can read my contribution, which is not what I'm going to read from. And so I have the honor of filling in for Saki Hall, who is not with us at the moment. And so the words that I'm about to speak are very much not my own, but I will try to do them justice. Okay. So living in Jackson, Mississippi, and building Cooperation Jackson has been a huge struggle. Our work here in Jackson is filled with complexities, contradictions, successes, failures, and everything in between. As we continue to document that history, it is important that we provide a clear analysis that allows people to see how we moved this project and what the future can hold for its success. This essay is not meant to review our self-criticisms. That important reflection is developed elsewhere. Here I share the unspoken struggles, those less directly dealt with difficulties, which more than often than not provide lessons we must glean for building our movements. These are based on life in Jackson over the past decade, and I hope they will contribute to strengthening our people, empowering our community, and informing the wide range of communities and movements reading this book. Based on 20 years of educating and organizing throughout the United States, it is intended to pose some critical questions more than provide cliched answers. My time in Jackson has often led me to question if all the hard work was worth it. In a much more visceral way than I've experienced before at different points in my life, I wondered whether we had gained as much as we had lost. During one of the most difficult times between 2017 and 2018, I was separated from my political home, the organization I had joined at the start of what I call my conscious participation in the Black Liberation Movement, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, parentheses, MXGM. Cooperation Jackson was asked to divorce itself from the family of Chokwe Lumumba and the Lumumba administration led by Chokwe's son. Friendships, comrades, and political relationships were strained and a significant number of them completely lost. Many people declared they would not take sides as a matter of principle and then slowly disappeared. The full quote from Amin is necessary in our work. He wrote, "Hide nothing from the masses of our people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victories. Moving beyond solidarity to action, beyond mobilizing to organizing, beyond cultural activity to base building requires memorizing this full quote and, more importantly, putting it into practice. Telling no lies and claiming no easy victories must mean honestly assessing the lack of political education, leadership development, and engagement in the hood, where there is no real campaign or project to engage the people. Getting out the vote is one thing, but building or rebuilding a base within the community is another. Based on our own work over the years, Cooperation Jackson's leadership knows that we have a long road ahead to become deeply rooted in the community and gain the people's trust. We recognized in 2015 that developing the solidarity economy component locally was more than simply introducing it to the base. We had to start from scratch. We had a relatively strong membership, but by 2018, after the unfortunate splits, we had to rebuild that base. While plenty of people want to say and think that this separation was based on personal differences, there were very fundamental differences politically and ideologically. We internally discussed the Kush Plan, which was at a crossroads, and understood that as an effort at a coordinator strategy, it was, in essence, dead. What then does an organization, an experimental project birthed from a long process that led to the strategy do in such a situation? We agreed to keep doing what we started out doing, and to continue even in whisper campaigns and threats to our work, even if whisper campaigns and threats to our work continued. We believe in the idea of letting our work speak for itself. It has to if we truly want to unplug from the nonprofit industrial complex, if we truly believe, as scary as it might feel, that the revolution will not be funded, we have to move forward with deeply grassroots base building in our communities. And despite our plethora of media, social media, and self-made media, the revolution will still not be televised. This is not to say that special funding or media will not play no role in our work, but the hard work of building and sustaining radical movements cannot be reliant and dependent on either of these elements if we are to truly organize for people's liberation. Thank you.
Tell him, Anthony, if you could.
Well, first, let me apologize to all of you. I got excited about coming here after being in Arizona, reconnecting with Shaywaal and meeting Maria. About some of the work that SEIU is doing towards developing the solidarity economy here in New York. And you know, I was a little giddy because we've been trying to pull together what we call the Union Co-op Initiative, like from day one. And that shit has been hard in Jackson, in our context. Just for folks who may not know, you know, Mississippi is a state that's ruled by the Taft-Hartley regime, which means it's a right to work state, which means it's a right to work for less, with no rights, no collective bargaining in fundamental essence. And other ways in which, you know, the white planter class, which still fundamentally runs Mississippi's economy, political economy, intervene to disrupt any form of worker power and unity. Now that's not to say that there aren't trade unions there, they are, but they are fundamentally weak compared to what you all are used to, say in New York, New Jersey, the tri-state area. But then we also need to just take a step back and recognize that none of the unions are as strong as they once were and as they should be, right? So Bruce took a bunch of my thunder in terms of, you know, like the dialogues that we need to have with each other. And so part of, I'm deviating from, all of what I'm gonna say is derived from our experience over the last decade and some change, and some components of it can be found in the book. But what I was apologizing for, I promised to do a whole new like PowerPoint and presentation, which is a basis of a new book that I've been struggling to write for a while. And I got overexcited trying to recreate the damn book. And so what should have been like 10 slides, I got like 200 of them. I couldn't figure out, you know, like what to keep and what to take. So Shaywaal was like, he hit me with the, you know, the PowerPoint, but I'm like, I'm working on it. So finally at about like 4 o'clock this afternoon, I said, I'm gonna have to just do some basics and keep it simple, but then try to speak to some elements and aspects of this particular presentation to make. And this is an argument that we are trying to interject into the solidarity economy movement, into the social justice movement, period. I just want folks to be clear about that. You can agree, you can disagree. The point is, from our perspective, I believe we present our best ideas and let the people grapple with them. You know, it's not to impose, but if I'm gonna come before you, I need to come with the tightest shit I have possible, you know, so that, you know, you can step away and either take something from it or deduce from it. That will work in my context, or it may not work in my context. And so part of this is gonna be framed about that. And so we've been calling this little thing like the build and fight formula. This is a little short take. So what let me say off the top, part of what we are trying to argue, you know, with the broad left, but particularly two segments of the trade union movement and the solidarity economy movement, we have to work our way out of this deficit way of thinking. And what do I mean by that? Because of so many defeats that we've suffered the last 30, 40, 50 years, there's often an approach that we don't have enough, or we're not connected to enough people, you know, to really move things in a fundamental way. And if you're thinking about things being coordinated and organized, then I would definitely have to agree with Brother Bruce. Our organization is piss poor, right? But if we take a objective step back and we look at these things that we call the practices of position, that's on this framework. And if we look at all the different type of mutual aid projects that are going on, you know, in all the cities and in rural areas and in semi-rural areas, and if we look at all the different food sovereignty, you know, be it community gardens or different things, and I can run down the list. If we look at all the different projects that are going on, we can quickly see that it's not a deficit problem that we're working with. It's an organization and it's a unity problem. Because there are enough things going on with enough people engaged that we could be profoundly in a different place if it was just halfway organized, right? If we were just halfway communicating with each other, halfway planning with each other, right? And not just like on the political sense, but in the material production side of things, right? If you look at that, that we could create from the bottom up a radically different economy, or we could sway the existing economy to move more in our way, and both are going to be required, right? Because it's not enough to just like build the alternative. At some point, the things that we call alternatives are going to actually have to do some battle with, the dominant set of capitalist relations and all the corporations. They're going to have to go to blows with each other, and don't think that they're not. Right? Like at some point, we're going to have to displace those set of relations and replace them with a new set of relations. And so for me, and I think for us, part of our thing, folks may have heard us say, we don't just do co-ops for co-op's sake. There's never been kind of cooperation Jackson's model or mantra. Like if we find something else that's going to help us organize the people better, we'll do that, right? But for right now, in terms of teaching the broad kind of self-organized, democratic rules and principles to build a broad movement of equity and equality and skill building that we think we need to be able to move to lift up the people and lift up the working class, this is one of the best forms to do it in, right? And I think in the course of time, if we do enough synergy between the unions and the co-ops, we'll come up with something a little bit different that will put us in a qualitatively different state. But what this piece is, let me get into it, because I could talk forever about this, but part of what this thing is, I want you to think and read this like in somewhat sequential order. Not that it necessarily happens to do that, but there is a logic to why we put things in this particular order, right? And I'll try to go through it first and foremost. So the mutual aid piece, and this is something that I would say, speaking for myself, learned particularly from the beginning of what we were doing as People Strike. And that was an effort to really try to move working people throughout this empire to come together to deal with the challenges that were being posed by the pandemic. And to utilize some of the strategic opportunities that were present in the pandemic. And that's where, for me, I learned this whole piece around this deficit form of thinking. Because we were witness to some profound things that happened in the pandemic that we didn't think were possible, that kind of suddenly revealed themselves to be very possible. Let me speak to two. One, we've been told, so I had the benefit of going to Rio in 1992, one of the first major international trips I went on. And we were told, this is the Climate Justice Conference, that the world economy was too big, it was too complicated, too dynamic for there to be any kind of radical or sudden change to deal with the climate crisis and the ecological crisis. We saw them shut that shit down in the course of a couple of months on the cause of the pandemic. It wasn't too complicated then, right? I mean, they really shut it down. So much so that you just, the CO2 levels and the methane levels came down, like skyrocketing down. We saw, coyotes and deer running around through San Francisco and all other parts of the world. The animals started coming back. The water started getting a little bit clean for a little bit. So what we kind of learned, if we step back and look, if the political will exists, certain challenges could be met pretty quickly. The question is, how do we build that political will? But the example existed. No, you cannot lie to the people and say that this is too complicated or too big for something to actually happen. We all were witness. We were all alive then. I think all of us were conscious then, and we witnessed that. But have we assessed that together? No, we haven't. We haven't had a dialogue about it. Right? We haven't had no dialogue about it. I'll stop with that one because I can go on. But what came out of that in particular, one of the things that was going on that I was really personally moved by was the degree to which communities all throughout the United States, in the world, responded with massive degrees and massive programs of mutual aid. Right? Farmers were just saying, like, skip the middleman, I'm gonna go directly to communities. and start distributing food, not just in the Midwest and not just in the South. That was happening all throughout. Some of it was fairly well documented, right? And what that demonstrated to me on a certain level, a deep level, was that neoliberalism has not completed this project and perhaps never will. And that's a victory for us. And what do I mean by that? To me, neoliberalism, you can look at all the privatization, all that, but at its root, it's an anti-solidarity ideology, right? And the capitalist class wants that to win over so that we don't see any need or necessity to work with each other in any form or fashion. And what the experience said is, despite all of its gains, and we have to admit it's made some tremendous cultural gains in this country and throughout the world. Despite that, when the need arose, there was a massive response to mutual aid, right? That got wound up being organized. I'm sure many of y'all were involved in many efforts like that here, be it Hurricane Sandy or what happened during the pandemic. So that's there. But the deeper piece of what we want to get into is, part of what the solidarity economy to a certain degree in trying to meet people's needs, we sometimes have a hard time ascertaining what those needs are. And we often then have to rely upon some of the basic market mechanisms to try to determine what we should do, how we should do it, and when we should do it, right? And we know market logic is not the logic of solidarity, right? It's the logic of extraction. The mutual aid stuff that we do when we do it right, we gather far more information about what our people actually need and what they want. But if we stop and pay attention, like, okay, well, what do you need, what do you want? That's a lot of, information that we can gather that they should then give us some directives as to what should our productive activities be, directed towards. What gaps can we fill, right, that the system is presently not filling and has no interest in filling, quite literally, other than to, force more folks into impoverishment so that they can, reduce wages, reduce working conditions, and create a more exploitable population. So this is the fundamental reason why we start here, because it's a trigger of both solidarity, but it's also an understanding of, well, what are the needs? What are the needs that are out there? Now, one of the things why the food sovereignty piece is second, because one of the weaknesses about how we traditionally do mutual aid in this country is dependent fundamentally on kind of circuits of what I call charity, right? Like we have to ask different people for donations or corporations for donations to give out X, Y, and Z. And when they're feeling generous or when they got a bunch of stuff they just want to dump, they give it to us, right? They give it to us. And his weakness is if it's not in their graces to give it to us, then we have these shortfalls. Well, what are one of the fundamental ways that we can overcome the shortfalls? If we know a good sense of the caloric needs of the working class people in our communities, we can then begin to start planning, if we're serious about organizing, how to meet some of those caloric needs on a basic local level. I don't care if you're in an urban area, suburban area, or rural area. Right? There is enough space and enough creativity to uplift the productive capacity of our people to be able to do these activities, but it won't happen if it's just sporadic and we're not planning some level of, my community is going to grow this amount of kale or this amount of greens, your community is going to do X, Y, and Z. We can come together in our own kind of farmers markets, et cetera, or different systems that we set up to barter and trade or engage in monetary exchange to meet these particular needs that have been determined in part by what we're doing through our mutual aid connections to determine what the needs are, right? But we have to, for us as a second tier, we have to take care of some of the basic needs, but also get out of this realm of having to ask the corporations that are exploiting us to come up with to meet the basic needs, but it also engages us in a level of self-agency that we are already involved in. Right? People are already doing this. It's not like we got to ask a whole bunch of people to do something to do. People are already doing it. The question is, how do we get organized and have these conversations that you were talking about so we can do it in a much more systemic and a planned way? That's why it's the second one. Okay, the third one is worker self-organization. That was initially something called, like the initial version that said cooperatives. We took that out because it was too limited. It didn't talk about the union co-op initiative and the other forms of working class self-organization, be it in worker centers or underground immigrant forms of labor organization. And we need to speak about that comprehensively and find ways to unite, whether the NLR be protection or not. That should not be our frame of reference in the broad totality of what we're trying to get at in order to meet the basic needs. In fact, some of the things we argue is to argue against that logic because it no longer works for the working class, I would argue, if it ever really did. That's a debate, but we can have that. But that piece there is to how do we start working and having direct conversations about not only improving our sites of where we work, but ultimately we got to think about how do we socialize all of this, be it in some form of ESOP, co-op, whatever the situation might be necessary or feasible within your particular area. And the main piece of it is, how does it relate to those first two pieces, right? Well, the intentionality piece of that has to be in the worker self-organization has to start driving the productive capacity of transforming either small businesses that exist, right? And there's a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of baby boomers out there whose businesses are ending or transitioning, and their workers know how to run the place and do it well. Those need to be converted in co-ops. But we also need to look at some of the initiatives, like what I would argue was going on with Amazon. Don't just think about, the best conditions for that exist. Think about turning it into a broader public utility through a co-op. Like envision that. Since they're not gonna argue with you about a contract, because they still ain't bargaining with them, right, at the end of the day, right? They won the union, but they don't have a bargaining union. Think about putting that on the broad platform of what we can do with something like that. And we're gonna have to contend with that level of capital's gain and accumulation to be able to make a lot of this work. The other piece that we put on there, which is connected, is this piece called community production. And I'm gonna go through this pretty fast. That is an effort to both deal with climate change, but to also re-articulate the economy around local production. Because it's our argument within Cooperation Jackson, to a large degree, for a number of different reasons, too long to go, capital don't really have no interest in creating jobs anymore. It really don't, right? And some of the jobs now, like what Graber said, we just got a bunch of bullshit jobs, right? Things that they just got to keep people from tearing shit up, quite frankly. And if we know this and we start planning and thinking for ourselves on how do we engage in this, one way to deal with not necessarily a broad jobs creation program, not saying that's not necessary, but it's to relocalize a number of different things to meet both the needs in terms of spreading things around, but to also deal with the work conditions and, more importantly, some of the things about working hours, right? Given the way, the nature of where tech is, the productive capacity of capital, there's no reason any of us need to be working 40-hour weeks anymore, in all reality. Like, and that's a question that's only going to be transitioned when we, I'm going to use the old language, ultimately seize the means of production and then, control them democratically. All right, let's just be real about that. So that community production piece is about a particular way to put some of these new technologies directly in our community's hands and utilize them to re-articulate things in our particular interest. This piece around the digital infrastructure is something we just recently added. It's a way to combat, what automation and AI are doing and create appropriate technology that helps to facilitate democratic planning and execution amongst our communities, and to create tools that actually serve us and instead of it serving itself. Self-defense speaks for itself, and ultimately we're saying this needs to all come together through broad we call it people's assemblies, planning councils, etc. This is a particular form and a program of action towards getting people to see each other as the first line of defense and to begin to start thinking around how do we transform the actual society from the ground up. This is what we want to put out in the new work as a contribution with a lot more detail. But just trying to argue with folks like, look, we have the tools and we actually have the numbers to do this. It's an organizing question, right? It's a power question, but we're not going to get to that power dynamic unless we do sufficient organizing. So that is our challenge, right? And we should not suffer for vision. And that's part of what we think that we kind of contribute to this because, being in the middle of Mississippi, in the middle of Klan country, where, Trump is old news and those politics are old news to us, you gotta have a lot of vision. I think that's what the South really, brings forth best. You gotta have a lot of vision around thinking another world is actually possible in order to really deal with the day-to-day dynamics of how rough, the oppression and exploitation actually is. So we try to offer that up based on our experience. Not that we got everything figured out by no stretch of the imagination, but there are some pieces that we think from our experience, if we can hit on this, we can hit on that, and get folks to dialogue with each other. We ain't got to agree on everything. That's not even the point. But if there's some basic fundamentals that we can execute, we can move some mountains. So I'm gonna stop there.
Great.
Thank you, Patty. And also, you need to have a good designer that make your flyer look like a reggae concert, by the way. That's a really good flyer, by the way. Anyway, I am Maria from Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City. And we connected at the Arizona State University Conference of Workers and Democracy, where we were presenting our projects here in New York City. We are an organization that works as a network, and we have been around since 2014. Let me see who's in the room. Who's part of a co-op here right now in this moment in your life? Raise your hand. Okay, that's a low number, guys. Who's part of a community garden? Yay, gardeners. Who lives in an HDFC or co-op housing? 1 person, 2, 3, 4. All right. So it's nice to be among friends and celebrating a book. I find that books are making new friends that come together and meet each other in books. So I'm very happy to be here, be a friend of this book, and find new friends in this book. And as I was saying, CINIC is a spine, is a support network, and we work with what we have been defining and organizing and creating as a framework for the solidarity economy, to be able to learn the particularities of the needs that we need to organize to be able to self-manage our existence, right? That's the abstract piece of that, but it comes down to, for us to coordinate our imagination about how is that we're going to live in these crevices of capitalism, trying to make things worth it for us with our creativity without exploiting each other. And in that process, we have been imagining and creating some frameworks, some definitions for the sectors of the solidarity economy in New York City. We work in collaboration with people that are doing the same nationally. And so we have a couple of proposals for those frameworks, right? We want to think about the solidarity economy. As we know, there are other people that are thinking about it constantly to define the solidarity economy as a framework, as a movement. So right today here, we're talking about the solidarity economy movement in the United States and the world, because here we are so many people that are interconnected to other parts of the world, right? And from Mississippi to the Bronx, although we know that it's impossible to translate the same things that happen in Mississippi with co-ops to New York City, we know that both places share the reality of the Bronx being the poorest congressional district and Mississippi also being one of the poorest places in the United States. And how is that we are creating our institutions for the solidarity economy. And I have very little time because I want us to talk with you all. And so let me see what I choose to talk about. I want to tell you that here we are in a collaboration that we have been developing this past year with CHCA. Who knows CHCA, Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx? This is the largest worker cooperative of the country, probably in the healthcare industry in the world, perhaps. Maybe comparable to what Mondragon is doing now, maybe different, but we have that particularity about home care, Cooperative Home Care Associates. We have Co-op City, which is the largest housing cooperative also in the United States, located in the Northeast Bronx. And 1199, that as we are in this building and happy to be here. And we started to communicate because CINIC, as a solidarity economy institution, we do, an organization, we are governed by our 100 plus 20 members, and one of our main programs are based on educating and working with cooperatives, supporting the understanding of the frameworks and the practices of the solidarity economy. And so we met with a couple of people from CHCA who had been working with Shaywaal, Denise Hernandez, who introduced us to this, the exploratory committee that 1199 was doing, and we started to organize and to move towards creating these interconnections and this cooperation with cooperatives, right? That's what we want to do. And one of the things that we practice from these principles and that resonate from what Akali was saying is that we think as organizers. We don't think about creating projects, right? All of our initiatives are with the mindset of organizing, and for doing that, we require a lot of coordination at different levels. And so this coordination that we are working on with CHCA, with Co-op City, and with SEIU is giving us a lot of opportunities to think about and analyze what are the infrastructures that we have, what are the infrastructures that we need to create, and what is the kind of education that we need to pull or to actually take advantage of the process that people in unions have been living as leaders of unions, and also the workers in the largest worker cooperative in the United States, so that we are able to collaborate and do business. And what would that look like? Let's see, what else do I want to show you? So something, how would that look like is we are working on that, but the background of how this looks like is all these things that are happening in New York City already, which are we created the map this past year. Let me see if I can put the link there. Okay, so this is our map, and here you can see all the different sectors of the solidarity economy that we were able to map out. The orange dots are housing, including HDFCs. Have you seen this map before? Raise your hand. Anybody? Some people. Okay, cool. All right, so just to give you a sense, this is the background of the context and the density of cooperatives, community-controlled initiatives that include community gardens, worker cooperatives, CLTs, community land trust CLTs, energy, community-supported agriculture, and food. And as Kali was saying, this map helps us to come together to assess and evaluate what is working in New York City in terms of cooperative creation, incubation, funding. How do we unplug from the nonprofit industrial complex to be able to grow the solidarity economy in an autonomous way that has its own ways of assessing, evaluating what works and what doesn't. We are a decade in this trend of incubation, and we need an assessment and evaluation as soon as possible. So this is what we are also doing at the same time that we're working on this initiative in Co-op City. And let me see if I can come back for my other situation. Can you help me to go back to the PowerPoint? Operator, smooth operator in the background. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. So this is the background of what we're working on. As I said, these are within this map you can learn more about the sectors that we work with and the sectoral organizations that support the different areas of work that people are doing, and these are the institutions that we count on in New York City. But this is our cohort where Denise and Cynic and us met, and where we learned about the exploratory committee. And one of the things that how we see the solidarity economy, and you probably all know about these values, but it's also always good to remind us, right, that we're rooted in cooperation, democracy, respecting the planet, non-extractive practices, racial justice, and mutualism. And we have a lot of groups that are coming together to do this. But going into the specific project that I want to talk to you about, which is related to actually coordinating cooperation between cooperatives and unions, we are looking at how we can study our different supply chains within the specific work that home care aid workers are doing with CHCA, right? How do we analyze what is that we need to create for that industry to be a value-based chain, right? And what we're learning is that we have a lot of work to do, but we are betting at, this is our picture of one of us hitting a piñata that says capitalism. That's one of the things that we do. But at the same time, we think a lot about how to analyze and create and change value chains, and that each part of the creation, production, exchange, consumption, and surplus allocation, we are doing it with cooperatives, and not only cooperatives, but community control initiatives where we are able to interconnect people, relations, and make them sustainable. So we have been visiting Co-op City for a while, and we have an example of one of these value chains in the Bronx. I'm sorry. And so how we are seeing these value chains in the Bronx is a community garden, amalgamated housing. We have a credit union. We also have the community supported agriculture. And so based on these little nooks that exist already, how can we expand participation for union members in this case? How can we connect residents in Co-op City to hire community home care associates for their home care aid needs? And so right now we're at the phase in which we are in conversations with the Coalition to Save Affordable Housing Co-op City that is going under a huge attack for increases in several aspects of their community-controlled, humongous cooperative infrastructure that they have there. And in fact, Shaywaal is going there on Monday. And we are planning a couple of events in which we have identified these 3 phases. We are now moving a little bit from research to our pitch. You are part of the pitch, so please give us feedback about how this sounds. We are, as I was saying, connecting people in Co-op City who are also union members to hire home care aid services from CHCA. That's one of the, in basic terms, that's what we're trying to do. And at the same time, fostering union members' engagement in the solidarity economy so that we can plant more seeds of different ways of creating community control initiatives in this part of the Bronx. And as we all know, there is a tissue of cooperatives in the Bronx that is historically that has existed for a long time, that is solid, but it has also been under attack for a long, long time because it is dangerous for capitalists and enterprises in the Bronx. And so we are fighting that and building new relationships. And we want to replicate these ideas, connecting several neighborhoods that have union density with cooperatives, and see what kinds of exchanges can happen. We dream of community gardens being completely populated by all kinds of people, but also union members having commitments to create CSAs, commitments to start a food co-op, commitments to demand from the union that the union builds housing. And so that we are doing that kind of exchange education so that we can continue to expand this tissue of solidarity economy in New York that is there, but it needs, and what we need capital, we need credit unions to create new financial services for all of these types of enterprises. We have been working with several credit unions to, for example, give accounts to community gardens that are not legally incorporated, and they have 7 people that are in charge of finance. The account has to be open in the name of 7 people, right? So that's just how things are. If we go to the granular details of how it is to have community controlled, democratically managed initiatives in a neighborhood, right? So we are, and in the book you can see so many details of how to change that kind of finance for the local economy. What does it take? How do credit unions need to interact with our communities and actually serve us? And as they have the obligation to do that as credit unions, as community development credit unions. And so we hope to replicate this in other area, and the map has several areas that have a high density. We're pairing those areas with a union who is also providing a lot of technical support and technology. We are we're sending massive text messages to 7,1199 members that live in the Co-op City zip code, and we'll have an event to do a Solidarity Economy 101 workshop at the end of April. That's one of the things. And after that, we will have a gathering for cooperation that will be all about health. So those are the plans, and we want to have questions and comments from you all, but yeah. And join and go to our website, follow us on Instagram, email me, talk to me afterwards. But there are opportunities to engage and also to learn from so many people that are already doing these kinds of projects. We have a spotlight on mutual aid in New York City on April 16th. And there we are inviting all kinds of mutual aid groups to talk about how it is to start at moments of crisis, how to make each other sustainable, but at the same time, how to not subsidize the neoliberal cop mayor that we have right now in New York City with our blood and tears. And also, of course, a shout out to all the people that are doing mutual aid for all immigrants arriving to New York City. We are really exhausted, but I think it's a really great practice for our revolution.
Maria said it all. I like that. So, the one thing about us for 1199 is going back to the old school, going back, door knocking, invigorating and engaging our members. And this is why this Adopt a Co-op program campaign that Maria just explained to you is so invigorating. It's now like new steam again, bringing back the engine again. And we want to do this all over in Brooklyn and East New York, in Brownsville. We want to do it in Harlem to wake up our members about a new economy and begin to fight to anchor ourselves through healthcare. And that's I'm glad that Maria's pointed that out. We're going to be doing this all over the city and probably, hopefully, in the States, all over the country. But I want to quickly, I know time is running out. I know you guys may be a little restless, but I wanted to Bruce to sort of kind of capture what is happening now in Brooklyn and sort of explain the project that he is doing to us really quickly. And we'll just go into maybe 5-10 minutes with Bruce. Thanks.
Just first of all, I just wanted to thank Matt and Collie and Maria for the work that you're doing. It's humbling, and I think that if we cannot figure out how to get a civic infrastructure of some kind that gets us all under the same tent, then we're not going nowhere, right? I think that us having labor community efforts along these lines are very important. I think it's important to have the expectations of the union being a vibrant partner and stakeholder in a lot of these activities that you're talking about. And so You know, it's, for me, it's really getting a beachhead going in these different areas that we can learn from and be in dialogue about and grow. I am really concerned about how siloed we are and how it is we get out of that. And I see it to be a symptom of the decades of beatdown that we've been getting and the lack of trust and confidence that we have, that we end up locking ourselves away either as individuals or either as separate organizations, or it's just we don't get energetic around achieving the capacity that we need to be effective. And so that's the mindset that we're trying to nurture right now among ourselves. I have no show and tell for you about all the wonderful things that we've done, because that's really not what this is about. Huh? We're losing, right? That's what it's about. And there's a necessity that we start to do some things very differently. And so we've been in dialogue with the employers, healthcare employers in Brooklyn about the safety net, about the supply chain, about agreements to utilize these supply chains to create jobs. You know, in Brownsville and East New York, we got people living 13 years less than they are in other parts of the city, right? It is, this is a crisis that's treated as normal, right? And so we're looking to get as many different sectors. And you know, I realize that in this dialogue this evening, that we really have to work to get common language also in terms of the dialogue. And you know, the language, our language that we use is something that we really have to be looking at. I was thinking, we were having some discussion. It seems that often when we have these kind of dialogues, the expectation is that everybody's speaking to have everybody else join them, right? I don't think that is, I'm not asking you to join. I need to join you. We need to be joining each other. Our language needs to reflect the necessity of us beginning to find more common ground around what's going on in our communities and aligning ourselves. You know, what will it take, you know, for us to have some trust and confidence when we sit in the room to feel as though we can really start to collaborate and get excited about where we're trying to go together. You know, we've created this Brooklyn Community Collaborative that is made up of a number of different groups and organizations, CBOs, unions. We're looking at aligning ourselves with community boards, starting to have these institutions that are in our community more democratized, and us starting to see them operate and work in a collaborative way so that we have greater strength, right? I know many of us are involved in the SUNY downstate struggle that's going on in Brooklyn. We're thinking about a health and wealth domain, how we can start to map out a section of the community and get as many people under the tent with a shared vision, strategy, plan of action to begin to address the issues. And we see the methodology that is important is one in which the residents and community are encouraged and can start to see themselves as the creator of their own tomorrow. Not that these outside folks come in and have all these big ideas and are the creators for them, telling them what's best, right? We engaged over 250 high school students to get out into the community, to begin to get engaged with residents, to survey them, to develop their own tools to do that, to come up with recommendations. That happened close to 10 years ago. Some of these same students are now back in the community. They've made public policy being a part of what they want to do, how they see themselves. They're working along with us. You know, we're thinking that we're on to something. When residents can start organizing themselves and they're having this relationship with young people that are all pulling in the same direction. We took the recommendations that these high school students and even Medgar College students came up with, and from that we created another coalition that's called the East and Central Brooklyn Call to Action. And we're leaving the doors open as wide as we can to begin talking with as many partners as we can to get their voice in the mix, right? Because we don't think we can go very far in terms of being effective unless we have this mindset that is attempting to really get more people on board, right? And we know that in the course of this dialogue that we're going to be changing how we operate, how we're thinking about this. We have an agreement right now from 4 hospitals that 10% of their it's not non-essential, but their essential service can be used for businesses, minority businesses, and to stimulate the local economy. And so we're in the process of trying to figure out how best that could be organized. And at every point in all of this, we run into every CBO or every group we pull in. Often we run into this way of operating that is not really thinking about how do we do it differently, right? And so we're really at an important crossroad in our future to where we got to get this right, right? We don't get to continue to make mistakes around this here because people go home on you, right? These residents that we're addressing right now, we're involved in a housing campaign in 4 buildings, high-rise buildings, 4 of them simultaneously in fight with a landlord. And this whole working together building among themselves, seeing each other as their first line of defense and problem solving, as an approach to how they have to operate to be able to sustain a struggle that's effective in the community that they lead, right? And that we have to learn how we operate as stakeholder institutions, as hospitals, as other organizations that may not emanate as deeply from the community. Right now, we have hospitals that are taking the lead, particularly One Brooklyn Health, is taking the lead around this health equity issue and helping the staff. We met all 3 shifts with 3 hospitals to get engaged in the dialogue with the interns and residents about how the hospital can begin to transform itself and have a better relationship with the community, one that is more democratized and where the community has a stronger voice of influence in terms of how the hospital operates, right? So I think these are examples of where we have to start to do some things differently and humble ourselves in a lot of different ways as labor and as community. And when the brother said the union is not as strong as it used to be, I think if we do the right things, the community and residents will love the union, right? And I think that the community organizations, if we bond together properly and start winning these struggles more effectively, people are gonna feel a sense of recovering a lot of hope and a lot of confidence. It's low right now, it's very fragile right now. And so, and you know, I think I agree totally with a lot of the things that we have going on that are siloed, that are disconnected from each other. They are very powerful. And that the biggest problem that we're having is they're not organized. We are failing to bring them together as leaders effectively so that we can wield them in a powerful way. So let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I know it's a little hot in here. In the interest of time, we want to have a question and answer period. So you kind of like, it's getting hot. It's really hot here. And we're going over the hour and a half anyway. So why don't we open up to questions? And the floor is open. Just identify where you're from, brother, and who you are. And
Sure.
We'll take the mic.
Thank you. I'm Dipro from Extinction Rebellion, New York. It's kind of nerve-wracking asking a question after such inspiring talks. You spoke about us being siloed and redefining solidarity, and it really makes me think about in our work, you know, we can organize rebels to go and disrupt the U.S. Open. We can organize rebels to go and disrupt the New York Auto Show. But we struggle to get 15 people in a room to meet one another in community, right? I feel like the solidarity has to happen both within parts of the movement, but also within individuals, right? We have not only the engine of neoliberalism, but the computers in our pockets, you know, just keeping us from properly communicating with each other. Are there any lessons in either Jackson or NYC that kind of address that, the kind of individual siloing or kind of building connections? By the way, we have an event at the end of April, so just a quick plug about that too. But yeah.
So for us, I have been with CINIC for 2 years, but I have been involved in cause for a decade. I think that one of the things that I observe is that the time of the community building, and I actually don't want to call it that way because it's not as restricted as community building, but getting people together in a room for the long term takes a lot of time. and a lot of conversations. And I think for us, basically, the most basic thing that we have done is to ask people what they want to learn about. And it ended up that in our annual cooperative intensive, where we go and really delve into studying the solidarity economy as a movement, people want to learn about each other. So we basically spent 6 months talking about each other's projects and problems and solutions. And that has created a really interesting community of 30 people that are now a core people that are always in communication, going to events together. But it's just going back to those basics, what I have seen. It takes time. It takes actually creating educational processes that are not so strict or rigid, and letting people also participate from the beginning to the end in what they want to learn, and just asking themselves why are things happening where they happen, and what are we going to do about it. So basic organizing questions that come up as personal conversations, if we let the space to be that kind of space, and that needs to be organized. So it's just that, I think, for me.
I'll cite an example. Across the street from our center, the Balagoon Center, is an organization called STUPOT. And it's probably easily the largest homeless service provider in the state of Mississippi. And it's been under some very severe attack. The last maybe 6 years, 6 of their buildings have been burned down. The women's shelter been burned down twice. Their main office, there's some questionable structural damage, and they haven't been able to rebuild it. That was like 2018. And they've been targeted. They've been in the community on that street far longer than we have, going back to the 1970s. And there's local capital has a plan to gentrify. It's called the Capital Corridor Complex. They have a plan to gentrify that. And they've identified their longest, and most central enemy as being STUPOT. And so STUPOT is a Christian organization, and not necessarily a progressive Christian organization, to be clear. But they feed folks like six days a week, often twice a day. And there's typically any given day, there's about at least 1,000 people who might show up to get food, very easily. And when we moved in, the only initial solidarity that we had with each other is they don't call the police, and we don't call the police, right? But we didn't have much by way of initial solidarity with each other. It was very hard to establish a relationship. But we started drawing a large number of members. A good number of our members are houseless. So we started to just draw a large number of members by providing another service, providing people with first kind of hourly work, and people joining the co-ops, et cetera, doing. So there started to be an overlap. And, they had some practices, to be quite literally, that we didn't like. They used to make people go to church before they gave them food and stuff like that. And it was like, just get a damn food away. And the folks who want to stay for church, they'll stay for church. But the piece was, we the first 5 years, we kind of had this tolerable engagement with each other, and we would communicate about different things. We offered to give them some security, quite literally, at different points in time. Like, there's some reasons why your stuff is getting burned down. And we can talk about, some things that y'all might want to do. It's not going to be amenable to your values, whatever the situation is, but there are some steps. They didn't particularly take heed to that. So we kind of organized other folks in the community from their own members and our own members who we share the light, start watching out for things. It helped a little bit. But the big breakthrough for us was really around the pandemic, right? It was slowly kind of emerging, but it was really around the pandemic. And we started noticing there was about 10 of our members who, in between February and March, just disappeared off the scene. and they died. They died. We can never prove that they died of COVID, but I don't see anything else that would have taken them out. I mean, folks have been surviving, under adverse conditions for years. So we kind of identified that. And, Mississippi ran out of N95 masks like immediately. There were none like around. And so we kind of got into our immediate groove and we're following some example for some comrades in Italy. Because remember, Italy and Iran outside of China were the first major two places, at least that were reported, that had COVID. So, the first conversation with folks in Italy, it's just a bad flu. The next week, no, it's worse than a bad flu. Stop doing what you're doing to figure out something else. Because a lot of their folks got it and some of them started dying. So they were like, stop doing that. So we stopped doing that and we tried to figure out, what the hell can we do? And so we stumbled upon very quickly making masks, right? So our community production cooperative, started making masks. And eventually we were wound up doing a 3D printed version, which was for nurses and frontline workers. And then these, these cloth, reinforced cloth masks that we made. And we would give out, by May, we were giving 1,000 a month at Stupak, to folks in the community, directly in the community. And it made a profound change. And from that relationship of them kind of opening the door and being present with us, we've been able to have a deeper set of dialogues and conversations. And so the lesson to this, I can go on, the lesson to this, we found a mutual interest, even though we had nothing in common politically, ideologically, right? And that was the first thing of we had some conversations. Y'all don't want to leave. Y'all clearly not leaving, y'all here. We here, and we not leaving. So we have some things, both of us don't like the police. Y'all have a way of dealing with things internally. We have a way of dealing with things internally. So we share that, we can mutually reinforce each other. That led to a deeper dialogue. Well, what do you plan on doing with your property? What do you plan on doing with your property? We can work together. Let's do some fundraising together. Let's do some things together. So we kind of crossed the ideological bridge, right? We still have little ideological jousts with each other, not real debates. But we found an area I know how to work with you towards improving this community, even though I don't agree with you. And I don't agree with you. That's the beautiful part. We're very clear. I don't agree with your thing, and you don't necessarily agree with my thing. They ain't got nothing to do with interrupting the work towards building this community and making it better and keeping the forces of gentrification from taking us over. So we made a pact. Y'all don't sell the damn thing. We don't sell the damn thing, right? And so the critical piece is it took a long time to build a relationship. And the basic thing is, despite our differences, in part, we had no choice. We always in each other's face in one way or another, right? And so it was we got to make this marriage work one way or another. But the critical part, I think the qualitative shift was, in a time of crisis and need, we realized we need each other, right? And so that was the big bridge about us showing up and them showing up. So now there's a mutual stuff, and we just kind of very clear. We're very clear, hey, this bill is coming down. What's your position on it? This is our position on it. 90% of the time, we in straight unity, even though like I said, the ideological part is vastly different from where we are and where they are. And they've moved. I think they've probably shifted us in ways I wouldn't be totally, taking a minute to think about. But there's definitely some ways in which they get down, and I see now okay, that's our influence, right? And it didn't come from y'all got to do something different than you have. It's just okay, all right, you raised your point, you see the point, people don't change who's coming in, haven't changed who's volunteered. And so, you got to be present, and be on the ground and be intentional about whether, you like what I believe or not. We have some common interest in being in this place and treating it, justly, humanely, and seeing we all want everybody to live well here. What does that mean? That's the conversation we have now.
First of all, let's get some more input. I know we're short on time. We have a microphone in the front. Please come on up, maybe a few of you, if you have a question or a comment, come up to this mic. Let's take a few rather than just back and forth. Just because we happen to have some seats up here doesn't mean we have all the answers. We know we don't. So let's take these three for now. I'll just say one thing quickly as you're thinking about how to be concise. Here we are in New York City, and we're really smart, and we've been around for a long time. And then there's Jackson, poorest capital, poorest state in the union. And here we're watching in the middle of the pandemic as you know, and what poor means, what developed and undeveloped means, is a very different thing. Because these folk have figured out how they're going to take these 3D printers, these 3D printers, and make these masks that we were struggling to find out who would make them, and they were making them grassroots, giving them out that way. These are pretty shocking pictures for some of us who are like, oh my, they're left. Their organization is yards, miles past what we're doing here. And that's part of why we think Operation Jackson is special. Please say who you are, and if you represent an organization, and ask your questions concisely. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to be concise. My name's Stephen DeCastro, and I'm just a filmmaker specializing in like revolution. And I just want to say, you folks, your activities are so beautiful. I just couldn't believe hearing all this stuff, and I really appreciate hearing about what's going on in the Bronx. I'm very familiar with the Bronx. And we were talking about collectivization of the food, of the labor, the housing, and everything. And I thought, oh, well, what could we suggest to add to this list? And I think that one thing that occurred to me that we could co-opt is like violence. And so the state, I guess, is defined as the monopoly of violence. And so instead of the cops, we could add an O there and have co-ops. So instead of calling the cops, you can have co-ops. And so I have seen many revolutionary movements that have taken over the role of peace in the community. And what they found, instead of somebody else having authority to have violence on the community can have take that authority back. And what I have seen is that violence really goes down when you have that. And so I just want your comments on that.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you all. My name is Rebecca Lurie. You all know me, but some of you may not. So very active in this work. And I attached myself to the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies, where we now have a certificate program, 4 courses in this topic, called Workplace Democracy and Community Ownership. There's quite a few people in the room, actually, who are touching that program, or CUNY. And I want to sort of say the City University of New York is ours to own and control, like any public institution, our hospitals, our land, all these things. There's this wonderful book I've spoken to a lot of people about called Everything for Everyone, Oral Histories of New York Commune 2052 to 2072, and they throw life into the future 50 years hence, and they tell the story of during these times of crises in the 2040s and the 2030s, we took over the hospitals, which really harkens back to what happened in Lincoln Hospital in New York City, in the Bronx. So there's something about not being afraid to struggle, and I remember speaking with you, colleague, very soon after March or April of 2020, and it was like, we gotta have a fight and build strategy. We have to realize that all these crises give us an opportunity to build, but I'm trying to say all this and framing it in a question, so I'm very active with the Union Co-op Council of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. I'm positioned at the School of Labor. Going to the Labor Notes Conference. We're putting together some things for the radical left of labor to talk about co-ops. So very interested to see how we can influence the labor movement to embrace owning the means. And I think to frame it in a question or to really talk is, what are the muscles that we need to practice so we're ready for the next crisis? And there's always a crisis. You just have to spin the bottle and say where you land. There's a crisis there. So what muscles do we need to be building that look like the solidarity economy? And when we look at those muscles, I always hearken to a very, very dear, influential human to me, Alan Berkman, who said to me, what are your principles? Know your principles and stick with that as you go forward. So what are your principles and what are our muscles that we have to exercise, which I think, Brother, has to do a lot with practicing peace wherever we are as an active muscle. So.
Wow.
I can take some. How y'all feeling? I don't really have a question, Matt, my brother. But Kevin Steele, I'm with the People Center and the Spirit of Mandela. I want to talk to everybody real fast. How many of y'all heard about 1951 recharge genocide, the convention with Paul Robeson and alright, back. Right, you don't count. But right, so that was a non-guilty verdict, right? Fast forward 2021, the Spirit of Mandela we also hold a convention where we charge America with genocide, and they was found guilty on 5 different counts of genocide, 2021. How many people heard of that? Right, and that's amazing, right? But mainstream media was blocking that out, right? And our job in the People Center is to really grab up all these, not really grab up, but this is just how I told, right? To really organize all these organizations so we can have this one conglomerate, right? Shout out to Tupac Shakur, that's why I use that word, but we can have this one cohesive organization where people like, y'all got here a little late, so I don't really know about the topic, but your organization will be able to have like a people-centered representative out here in New York, or people-centered representative in California. We have this one big organization that has organizations in them, but we have this one phone call where we could link and we all have this same like real like strategy in one plane, right? That's our way of survival. That's our way of getting through this shit. We have to be our own liberators. And the only way we do that, we have these ties that connects us. Because I'm part of the campaign to bring Mumia home as well, but I'm still a people center, and that's a way of we all staying tied in. So if we could somehow, we have a table sheet in the back, I can find out a little bit more about us, and we could all tap in, and we could have this one big people-centered, cohesive, like, relationship, basically. I just want to say that real fast. Y'all can tap in a little bit. We got pamphlets and
All power to the
right
people.
there. Yes, sir. All power to the people. And that's all I just want to say. Yes, free Mumia and free political prisoners. So I would ask the question, right? Do y'all do anything towards the political prisoners, and how can we help each other? That could be the question. Thank you. Appreciate you, Matt. I love you too. Apologize. Thank y'all.
Hi, what's up, y'all? My name is Robert. In New York City here, I landlords for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think they shouldn't exist. And I just want to give props to Kelly. Thank you so much. Jackson Rising was an amazing book, and it's helped me in terms of my revolutionary thinking. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all y'all. My question is that, I work from home, and my apartment usually has no heat. And the way they do the heat is they put it on for 20 minutes and then it's off for hours. And they've been doing this for decades. And I've only lived there a few years, but the older residents that have been there like 30, 40 years, that's what's been happening. And so we're in court and we're fighting the slumlord. But and my beautiful date here has black mold in her apartment, and we were just in court for it, and she's had it for like maybe 20 years. And so my question is, how do we meet people's essential needs while we're building this movement, while we're building cooperatives? And so how can people, if they don't have their basic needs met, they can't even like think about organizing. They can't even think about, forming a cooperative or any kind of revolutionary thinking because they're just surviving. So that's my question, and thank y'all, appreciate it.
Thank you. Can we take this one last question and then?
Yeah, no.
All right, so let's this be the last question, and then we'll have some closing answers and comments. We'll sell some books, we'll have some conversations, we'll share some
My name is
emails.
Tim Dalton. I met Collie in Madison, Wisconsin many years ago, mutually network program. And I work with a group here in the Bronx called the Women's Press Collective. They're currently organized as a nonprofit, and I think that we should figure out ways to get them involved with Scenic, because they provide not only training, but also they have printing equipment that is designed to be used to help poor and working people get their message out and get the word out. So after, I'd like to talk to Maria a little bit about that. Otherwise, great to hear you guys. Thank you so much.
So I think that about the question of organization, which is what I took from one of the comments, if I'm correct, I think so. Yeah. I think that's one of the it's the central question for the solidarity economy in terms of one of the principles that we study, practice, and want to really think about together is plurality of ways of organizations and how we are going to share values and principles that are about practicing the fact that we are not creating economic development projects as financial professionals. We are not experts in the Wall Street investment. I see a lot of financial literacy being at the center of educational programs in New York City nonprofits, and it's a shame that that's what nonprofits are doing right now. Helping people to learn how to invest in the stock market has become a thing in New York City. Like, we talk about how much we pay for rent and how to invest in Wall Street. That's just incredibly unconscious and terrible, but I think that organization, in terms of what kind of organization do we need, I think is the question of the left historically. And I think we need to keep opening ourselves to non-sectarianism, although grounded in principles. And I think that the solidarity economy as a framework and as a movement offers us very clear principles. And I think that we see the solidarity economy as a toolbox for oppressed people, for marginalized people, to think about the solutions and to implement the solutions based on the most basic things that we have in front of our eyes that are pressing problems, and not to break from the dependence of the saviorism of nonprofits in New York City. We know that the neighborhoods that have been historically redlined, where there has been the most disinvestment, we have the richest nonprofits offering social services. So how are we going to look at that? How are we going to transfer that power? And I think that for me, coming from Ecuador, is just the same story as international development. And to looking at how do we see ourselves in our block, how will our block look like if you want to live in our block and have control over your food, the sidewalk, who's creating new jobs, opening the doors of the grocery store, which is an actual job right now in New York City. A lot of people do that to make money by the day. So I think that that's the kind of organization we're going to have to grapple with, to think about the ways that we're going to organize and create organizations in different sizes, capillarly interconnecting in neighborhoods across boroughs, which is very difficult in New York. But right now, I would say for us right now is like the hyper local is where we are looking at for organization and answers for how do people relate. Living room organizing.
You said something, Maria, coordinating our imagination. I really want to start using that. I thought that was very well put of how we might want to consider thinking about this relationship building, that journey that we need to get really invested in. The question of where are the muscles, when I think about that, I think about an emphasis that we need to put on this relationship building piece that needs to have budget attached to it. You know, we got to spend some money, some resources on this relationship building, this really this fragile state that we're in. And we have to think about together how we can start to utilize those resources. I've just recently really come to understand more deeply how climate justice and energy give us a real opportunity to think about solutions for community to operate together more strongly, because they can use their collective power around in this way And we have to think about where are those key areas that allow people to see each other in a different light and to really pull together more powerfully than they would normally. And so I think those are important areas to be considering and trying to look at as we embark on strengthening ourselves.
So I'm going to pass because I want to talk to you all informally as we're signing books and buying books at the very end. We're going to let Kali have the last word. And as a special guest in New York, we're going to just give an extra round of applause. And thank you, Kali.
So the quickest of the questions to answer is about political prisoners. That has been very central to our work from the beginning. We have, we named our center after a political prisoner, Kwesi Johnson, for a number of different reasons. But one of the most concrete way in which we deal with that is we try to put as much money on people's books as we can, right? In a number of different ways. We've been doing that, from the beginning. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on what we make and what the co-ops kind of donate or have left over at each and every year. But part of what we are planning on doing now is a whole series of murals. Really kind of borrowing and taking some lessons that we should have done some time ago about how the Irish used to uplift their political prisoners. So we about to do that. That's something we've committed ourselves to do, to really do a deeper level of education, amongst our folks about our political prisoners, prisoners of war, political exiles. The piece around violence and us organizing towards, undoing the violence of the state. A large part of the Jackson Kush plan was framed very explicitly to try to do that. And a good piece of the strategy about, trying to have a certain level of influence over the municipal government, we always stated very openly and plainly, was about trying to curtail, the repressive dimension of the police apparatus. Hasn't worked out that way, but, the aim and objective has been there. The most effective piece that we have seen is when the People's Assembly work at their best. They do exactly, that piece that was spoken to earlier about people seeing themselves as the first line of defense, right? And who and how they're going to do some problem solving. And the other component of that is how do you discipline and hold government accountable. So those are the two kind of, components of how we've envisioned people's assemblies. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it hasn't. It depends on the strength of where the movement is at. I'll leave it at that. In terms of the muscle piece, now you're speaking directly about the connections between like co-ops and unions, that those exercising social.
Not in one place, I think any place, but I'm very interested in influencing the union movement to think about muscles for democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But any place, right?
I'll speak to that one.
Okay.
And you can say Kali said this so don't get nobody else in trouble. And this is where the South has grown on me being able to tell stories. One of the things outside from the People's Strike experience, personally, I was very disappointed in the labor left or what remains of it. And some of the context that have come through labor notes that I know, through that. And the biggest muscle that I was disappointed with was the muscle of the imagination, right? That folks were not exercising that in an acute crisis. It's amazing to me, I hate to have to put it this way, but it's amazing to me how on the heels of Bernie Sanders' campaign, on the heels of healthcare workers throughout the country, DSA's kind of support, that when the pandemic started, there was an active conversation about universal health care. Now, it was being blunted, it was being, cast aside by Biden to support, him and Obama's, bill. But there was still an active campaign conversation about that. By the end of the pandemic, there was no conversation about it. None. Right? Now, how in the hell did we lose that battle that we should have won in the midst of that pandemic? I would argue that it was a lack of imagination and then translated to a lack of courage amongst many of the trade unions to seize the day. And if we don't actually use our imagination to envision something different, we definitely ain't gonna do nothing different. So that particular piece around what muscles we need to like really envision, that's a major one, right? And part of the piece that, is it true that we've been getting our ass kicked for a long time? Yes, but this is also where I think some story and narrative work and universalizing certain aspects of our particular histories is important. So for me, I always come back to something my grandmother used to tell my dad all the time, who was an active, member in the struggles in the 60s and 70s. She grew up in the 20s and 30s, and she's like, y'all ain't seen shit. Y'all complaining, blah, blah, blah. She lost 5 kids during the Dust Bowl. It was from Oklahoma. So she was like, I want to hear a goddamn thing. It was kind of old school. You straighten your back up, get your ass up and get to work and get to fighting, right? But it was kind of, the point of her piece was like, people of African descent, indigenous people, we done already seen some hell, right? And there's no hell you can talk about that we haven't experienced or your ancestors haven't gone through. So dig deep in the reservoir of your soul, your will, whatever the hell it is, your imagination, and come up with a way to survive and thrive out of this. Somehow that muscle is like lost, and we kind of wallow in the defeat, as opposed to like, all right, I'm down, I got an 8 count, but I'm not out to fight yet. I'm still breathing, I'm still alive. Let me figure out a new strategy, because clearly whatever, my jab ain't been working, or this hook is bad, or whatever the situation is, I got to, get up and rethink this a little bit. Don't remember the basics, remember the fundamentals, but also be creative. And I don't think we're doing that enough. And that's something that we really gonna have to do. And this is the piece, around both of our, the solidarity economy is growing in the United States, but let's not over exaggerate it. It's still small and weak, right? It's still small and weak, so we should be mindful about that. And the organized labor movement has been shrinking decade after decade. So there's no, if we continue to keep thinking we're gonna do both sides of this equation the same thing over, and keep getting the same results, we're gonna be out of here anyway. So we got every incentive to do something different, right? And we have to figure out how to do it in dialogue, in respect, with each other. And sometimes that's easier said than done, but I think the basic piece of while I was elaborating my stories, what is our common interest, right? And I'm on all for deep ideological debate and all that other kind of stuff. I'm very schooled in, I'm a nerd, I like that, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I gotta figure out at some point how to work with you. If you in my proximity in my community and work towards the same thing. And so I gotta, I don't give up my principles, right? But I'm very clear, I got to work with you towards this aim, whether we agree on everything or not. Now, can I do that without abandoning my principles? Can I do that without selling out to exploitative forces? Can I do that by building the capacity of people in our community to actually be the agents of change so that we can sustain this? Once either we do need resources, but if those resources come in and we ain't built no capacity, we're gonna continue to be dependent upon those resources, right? So we gotta figure out the primary thing, and this is a hard lesson we're learning now in Cooperation Jackson. Our primary resources is drawn from Amplicar. Our people are our mountains. That's where the resources ultimately have to be invested in, the building of people's skill and capacity to be able to take on this, whether we got any resources or not.
And to add to that, I think in relationship to this idea of muscle that you bring, I think we are counting on the muscle of unions that have done the work with their members to think that they have to give back to the community as a basic principle. So this is a test for the unions to see if that's there, because this has also been, of course, the process of the pressures over unions just signing contracts, collective bargaining, but then what about more than good jobs? Well, we're not only machines to work, we're not only here for that. Like, how are we expanding outside of the workplace? And that's the question that we're gonna be asking to union members, and what is their imagination to give back to the community. So I think that there is a muscle there that we're gonna have to take advantage of, or awaken, or exercise really strong, because that's what we're counting on for the solidarity economy.
I think that also, on that note right there, that people who aren't in the union, thinking about how to educate the union and bring the union along, help the union to understand perhaps what it does not understand, is very important. I noticed a lot of folks, well, I can't say a lot of folks, but some folks, the way in which they see the union changing, right, is almost confrontational, right? And it's hard to hear somebody when they're beating you up about something you did wrong. But you know, and you know, I know it's hard to do a lot of these things, but I do think people somehow think that the union is supposed to educate itself and somehow move forward. I think it reminds me of how we move forward confronting racism. We can't think of it as white people educating each other and being left alone among themselves. I'm not sure what the outcome will look like if that's how we see racism being fought. Right? We need to be right there with them and having a voice there to help white folks overcome racism. And there's a lot of white folks that understand racism better than black folks and can be very valuable in that role. One last thing, real quick. I did a lot of struggle around political prisoners. In fact, the brother I was working for with trying to get out, Romaine Chip Fitzgerald died in prison after 52 years, right? The longest held Black Panther. And one of the things that I realized was we miss opportunities in all of that. So like, for instance, and this opportunity is still here regarding political prisoners and could probably have an important impact regarding Maria. And it's how we're thinking about this. So for instance, Linton Kwesi, right? He's been locked up all these years, a Native American, right? And we all know what the injury is this country has brought to Native Americans, right? And here, this country is finding it so difficult to forgive Linton Kwesi. Come on, right? I mean, there's been definitely, I think there was 4 FBI or 2 FBI that got killed in his case. But the massacres that have happened to Native Americans at Wounded Knee, and you know, this same location in which what happened to him. So I just feel like there's a door open there to appeal, to get people to look at things a little differently, to start thinking about this whole issue of political prisoners, and it can have an impact on others. But we have to quit being so siloed in our approach to this to make that happen.
So we say free Peltier, we say free Kamal Siddiqui, we say free Mumia, free Imam Jamil Amin, free them all, free the land, and let's free this audience here so we can have some conversation.
We want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Matt Meyer. Thank you, Carly, Maria, Bruce. And we need to do this again. We need to do this more often, right? And you'll hear from me next time.